Welcome to the next edition of The Fortress. Now, on tonight's show, I'm going to talk about a couple of things. One of the things I want to kind of talk about is, I'm going to hit a little bit on incrementalism and little things happening, a little bit at a time. And then I'm also going to, I'll go a little different direction, and I'm going to talk about escalation, how evil naturally escalates. And then maybe I might just try to wrap everything up. Might try to cite some scripture in my last segment to tie it all together. So, let's start with where things are going wrong. There was a time when I was growing up when what we knew as the right way of things was just known to be the right way. There was a time when our nation valued what was right. Those values were instilled by the Judeo-Christian ideals found in the history of both the Jewish and Christian religious systems. Those ideals were supported by an omnipotent God who gave us the Ten Commandments, which stated such straightforward commands that even kids in elementary school, such as myself way back then, we could understand them. Thou shalt not kill. Oh, okay. That makes sense. Thou shalt not steal. Oh, okay. I don't think I'll steal. So, what happened? Somehow we've found ways to justify breaking not just these commandments, but pretty much everything else viewed sacred at one time or another by most religions of the world. How did this happen? Looking back, there was a time when police officers were some of the most revered, respected, safest people to look up to. Granted, I didn't grow up in inner city Chicago, but when I was a kid, we had Officer Friendly. A police officer would visit our elementary school, come into various classes each week, and talk to kids about crime prevention, stranger danger, saying no to drugs. My mom and dad both told me when we were in crowded places, son, if you get lost and see a police officer, walk up to him and tell him you can't find your parents. Police officers on TV were some of the coolest characters to watch. And I remember how cool I thought it would be to wear some kind of badge of honor one day and help people feel safe. As I got older, I realized if a police officer pulled you over because you were speeding, you did what they asked. And there seemed to be no problems. As a college student, it didn't take me long, through the handy skills of observation, to see that if you provided resistance to what officers told you to do, there were consequences, usually involving those shiny little silver bracelets. This was enough for me to understand all the various reasons police officers were there and what law enforcement meant. But times, they have changed. Now, I know there's a large number of people that still show support and trust in the direction of law enforcement. But I would say because some bad apples tried their hand at treating people differently from the way officers are supposed to treat people, such as in the case of Rodney King, many police officers have earned a bad rap because of more and more of the bad guys gaining access to guns through illegal means. Criminals became more emboldened over the years, putting more and more officers in danger, forcing officers to think quicker on their feet and resisting arrest more often because of the thought of being able to get away with their crimes. Hey, if they had a means to fight the cops, illegal guns. The cops were still seen as the good guys for the most part when I was young, but as I got older, with an admitted understanding that corruption did exist, until a certain wing of the media and certain administration took over, they were still seen as the good guys. Something changed, a little bit at a time. The change was obvious. I, I wasn't a police officer back then, and I still noticed it. And because of the direction of my life choices, I found myself in law enforcement. And it was all the more evident to me. The ideas I had of police officers when I was a kid were not being shared by many in the public, and still aren't to this day now. And the news showed people like me, like my friends, like some of my co-workers, it showed us as the bad guys. As always being the guys in the wrong. Again, how the times have changed. But will it stop there? Oh, I don't think so. Not by a long shot. Not only has it become commonplace to resist the authorities who are charged with enforcing our laws, but people are actually trying to buck the natural law and order of things. Case in point, the transgender ideology. Look, I remember when the whole concept of cross-dressing was a big joke. There was some Dustin Hoffman movie where he dressed as a woman. He was praised for his role because of his ability to act like a woman. But it was a comedy. He was acting. Then of course there was Dennis Rodman when he played for the Bulls. He would cross-dress. The girl I was dating at the time, she could tell you, we both just would go like, what in the world? So, yet now we are supposed to be okay with men wanting to use women's restrooms because they wear women's clothes and it makes them feel better about themselves? How is that even right? This will offend some people. But at this point, I don't care. Because politics matter not when it comes to the right way and wrong way of things. We've known as a society, going way back through history, that people are born as either A, a boy, or B, a girl. Now, if you want to argue with me about genetics and hermaphrodites and things on a cellular level, well, I'm not that guy, so don't bother. I dwell in the realm of common sense and reality. And what used to be common sense tells me that if you were born with a certain necessary body part or without said body part, that was how God made you. Now, if you're an atheist, fine. Ignore me for the next little bit, especially if you need a safe space. But if you claim to be a Christian, then you should understand that God doesn't make mistakes. Yet the entire transgender movement fights for blanket acceptance of that kind of thinking that, oh, wait, God messed up on this one. Again, how is that right? I am sorry, but my God will not let me accept this thinking. If that is how they feel, fine. I will not judge, but I will also not condone or support it. And yet we're being forced to just accept it as is. There's a big difference between wanting people to accept you for who you are and forcing people to accept something that to them is morally wrong as fact, and forcing them to agree with you. The irony is anything related to this issue, the preaching of tolerance is intolerant with anyone who disagrees with their point of view. Now that could be another topic altogether, but out of respect for some friends who are professed homosexuals, I won't even touch the topic of marriage in this show. But wait, there's more. What about what society deems acceptable on television and movies for certain viewers of certain ages? I can think back to when I was a kid, and material in a Hardee's commercial today would have forced a movie with the same scene back in the day to be at a minimum rated PG-13. Remember the movie Six Pack with Kenny Rogers? When I was little, that was a movie my mother was hesitant to let me watch. Man, times they have changed. What about network TV, news, other shows? Things like sexuality, foul language and high violence are shown on the mainstream networks before bedtime for many kids. Scenes for which my parents probably would have asked me to leave the room for when I was little. Scenes of protests with people dressed like anatomical features, or grotesque language and scenes depicted on posters and picket signs. What about what is shown on the news? Oh, sure, they will warn viewers right before they show it, but there are some things that the news should probably just leave in the narrative form. No pictures needed. I mean, that's kind of what they do with the ISIS beheadings, right? Unless, of course, they want to desensitize the mainstream from seeing such things as blood running down someone's face as shocking. Look, I'm a grown man, and I have even exposed my 14-year-old to some things just so he is not caught off guard. But when did this become the norm? Where does it stop? When do we start showing the beheadings committed by ISIS on the mainstream? We shouldn't, should we? That would be ridiculous. Yet how do you know where to draw the line? The Bible is God's Word, and it tells us what is right. It tells us where to draw the line. Yet we just keep pushing that line out further, conveniently, for us, for our selfish needs, for our desires, for our debauchery. Sure, the Bible contains violence and everything you could expect in an R-rated epic movie. Yet, the entire story is told teaching the understanding of what is right and what is wrong in the eyes of God. For far too long, we as a nation have turned away from biblical principles that helped formulate laws in this country. Yes, there's a separation of church and state, but emotional thinking and people in the minority, they were given too loud of a voice over time. And the intolerance of the minority to anyone who disagrees has superseded societal trends in the good old USA. I pray every day for our country, and I also see little things every day that make me still hold on to hope that we'll come up out of this downward spiral of division and immoral standards. But there was a time when we respected the majority, and the majority had a better grasp of right and wrong. Without God, you really have no need for a right or wrong, but I digress. Continue to pray that God is victorious in the end, as He says. But our brightest days might just be behind us, because we have let those little things happen a little bit by a little bit by a little bit over time. So I want you guys to think about that. I'm going to go to a break. When I come back, we'll talk about evil and how it escalates. And it can just start with something very small.
Sometimes a person has to die to their old selves and become something new entirely. Robert Brady is such a man. Follow the man who has been an assassin, a soldier, a husband, a father, and a believer. But now the world thinks he's dead. After a teenage prodigy uses the miracle of science to bring him back from the dead, Brady must rediscover more of his past and adjust to a darkening world around him. Part of this book follows Brady through his journey down memory lane as he goes through what the prodigy refers to as memory building. When out of his memory building sessions, he learns of certain side effects caused by the science prodigy's tampering. When building his memory, he learns what a dangerous man he used to be. After an unfortunate flashback, Brady and the kid somehow part ways. Before long, he comes upon a town about to undergo an incredible evil. Can the people of the town accept a man formerly known as the Jesus Assassin? Can Robert Brady regain a part of himself that the townspeople can trust? Read the next thrilling story in the John Knox universe, where the dual nature in one man will never be more tested, in Book 1 of the Brady Chronicles, Dead Memories.
Okay, so Welcome back. What do we want to talk about this go round? Well, this segment, guys, is all about evil. Remember, I am all about revealing light in the darkness. And so I thought I'd start by just talking about my main character of my first book, because he illustrates just how evil naturally escalates. Now, of course, Robert Brady, the Jesus assassin, he's the extreme version. But in a lot of ways, evil can get to the extreme point of killing multiple victims from the tiniest evidence of its presence. Working in law enforcement, one gets to see and hear, and in some cases stop such escalation. Brady, in my first book, he starts out as a special forces operator. His death dealing doesn't start, though, until his family is killed, and he seeks vengeance. Now, vengeance belongs to God, not us. So, first of all, before you get any wrong ideas out there, I'm not condoning revenge, but I am condoning vigilance. And you'll see why. My character, he not only escalates his behavior, but he takes more and more risks. He pushes the envelope as revenge takes a hold of his every thought, even into his prayers. Can you imagine praying for the destruction of people? Guess what? ISIS does that. One can imagine how unhappy that would actually make God. Guys, this is how evil works. Let's take a basic look at domestic violence between a divorced couple. At first, the disgruntled husband may have trouble letting go of his ex. So he may start to call her house, but just hang up when his ex-wife answers. At first, it may seem like no big deal. But after some repetition, some repetitive behavior, the ex-wife becomes afraid. In many of these cases, because the ex-husband got away with the first line of offenses, he begins to call and leave harassing messages. And if he catches her on the phone, actually gets to talk to her, he may say some disturbing things that cause either more fear or even anger on the part of the wife or ex-wife. Many times if law enforcement doesn't get involved, the ex-husband becomes even bolder. He may start to follow his ex. He may purposely make himself seen at random times in awkward places just to make his ex feel uncomfortable. So much so to the point that she feels like she can't control it or him. As he increases his nerve, he may even confront his ex. And many times this is where the violence occurs. Police almost always end up being involved if the first time isn't deadly, but there is enough evidence to prove the wife was harmed. Of course, there are exceptions, but in most cases, if this type of incident happens twice, but the wife moves on with minor injuries the first couple of times, this emboldens the abusive husband or ex-husband even more. Are you seeing the escalation? Unless something happens to completely remove the woman from the situation, such as, she skips town, she loses all touch with her people that, come in contact with the ex-husband, know him, all that, then, these situations typically end one way. If she's not able to get away, either the abuser escalates things to the point that it forces a life or death showdown with police, the abuser kills his victim, or both. Now, I know nobody wants to hear about these situations, but they are very real. And if it has started happening to anyone out there, please take action. There is an inevitable course of events unless that evil is outmatched and stopped outright. Let's look at this with a different common scenario. School bullying. In this case I'm about to describe, maybe cyberbullying. A girl gets cut from the cheerleading squad because she was unique from the clique of girls that fit the mold for the select cheerleading group. Let's say a few of the girls, for whatever reason, send little messages to the girl that got cut. Let's say the girl tries to ignore the messages at first, so these mean girls send more vulgar messages. Or they try to do subtle little things to put the bullied girl in the spotlight, to embarrass her, to put her on the spot, that kind of thing. Perhaps this girl, doesn't have many friends and she's introverted. And she kind of hides in a shell and isolates herself because she doesn't know how to handle or respond to this abuse. The timidity shown by the girl who didn't make the squad emboldens those doing the evil actions. They start to say intentionally hurtful things. It becomes a competition amongst the bullies who can make the girl feel worse. Next thing you know, one day, the poor introverted girl takes her own life at a tender age because of the evil actions taken by others. Serial killers. Look at all the serial killers on record. There is blatant evidence that each killer started with perhaps killing just one person. If they never get caught for that one murder, and they are contemplating doing it again, the second murder comes even easier. And then, finally it escalates to the point you have a killer on the loose who feels so confident because he hides in plain sight and takes his victims unaware. His methods become more violent many times. Higher risk. Like the Jesus assassin, right? They begin to feel some warped sense of remorse maybe, so they almost want to get caught. But they still escalate. This escalation to evil has always existed. Take a look at the book of Job. How did Satan attack Job? He kept raising the stakes with God at the expense of Job. Why? Well, in Satan's case, it's because he was allowed to. There could be a whole separate, discussion, theologically as to why God allowed it. But Satan escalated because he was not stopped. And God chose for that particular sequence of events not to overmatch him. See, I think we're coming to a point where too many people are doing things to embolden evil. Look at radical Islamic terrorism. Look, the peacefulness of the actual religion of Islam can be debated all day long. I'm not here to do that. But the intentions and the actions of terrorists that practice a radical religion, which happens to be based on actual teachings contained in the history of Islam, are undeniable. Yet people to this day are still playing the "you're just going to upset them" card by talking about it. This is sheer idiocy. This is worse than the undeniable evidence to a spouse that her husband or ex is going to kill her because the abuser has a psychological advantage over her. But here, in good old USA, we are out of excuses. Read this carefully as I will type it slow. You are emboldening the terrorists by denying who they are. Guess what happens when an attacker encounters a timid individual who shuns away from their presence in fear, who shrinks down away from the threat? The attacker pounces. They dominate. They become relentless. This is what Americans who want to play nice with desperately evil people are doing with their false words of coddling. You're shrinking away from the problem. You understand what happened the last time we did that, right? Have you heard of the USS Cole, 9/11, Benghazi? I teach folks in self-defense classes and even in de-escalation classes, who deal with behavioral patients. If you encounter someone who wants to hurt you, you have to be assertive. The only way to handle violence, once it's present, is to either escape it, which just makes them want to come back at you, or stop it. Why am I saying all this? Because I'm sick of it. I have been wired my whole life to be aware of things when they are about to go south, when they're bad. Have I been wrong on occasion? Sure. But sometimes the evidence is just so compelling that you just have no excuse. Does this sound like I'm talking down to some of the folks out there? You betcha. Because if a football coach sees his player getting smoked by the same defensive player the same way over and over again, eventually that coach has to put his foot down. America, y'all got to wake up. All of us, the world, Christians, we got to wake up. We need to stop coddling these terrorists from all these dangerous places. And we need to show cowards, instead of making them braver and bolder, we need to overmatch them. We need to show them they're outmatched, and we need to stop them outright. And that can include using the Word of God, of course. It should. It absolutely should. But guys, we can't just keep ignoring evil. So the first segment talked about, we used to accept certain things as right, and that gradually, just little bit by little bit, more and more was accepted as right, even though it's wrong. And then, I just talked about evil. How it can start as a little bit of harassment. But then when people get away with harassment and it goes unchecked, that can build, that can escalate. Harassment can lead to violence, verbal threats, and then physical threats, and then actual physical violence, and then killing. There is a natural progression of things. So, what can we do with this information? I'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back.
G'day, mates. I bet you're wondering why I want to talk to you today. Well, I want to tell you a little bit about, the author Jason Fort and his great escapades controlling animals and such. Here you have him right here, sitting here wrestling a wild canine. And over here, look at this. Observe how the mighty Jason takes on a gator with his bare hands. He's got complete control, doesn't he? Heck, even his son's getting in on the action. Yes, that's the same gator. Don't worry about it. Size doesn't matter, right? Look at this. Complete control over another wild and dangerous canine. Okay, so those pictures are a bunch of bunk. But anyway, what he really is good at is writing a cool story. And in those stories, he incorporates a lot of animals and animal attacks and all sorts of wild and crazy stuff. But how can you resist those things, right? And heck, look, he's got a face only a mother could love. So anyway, go check him out. If you go to www.jason-e-fort.com, you can find out everything you want about the author. G'day, mates.
Welcome back to our little closing segment. So what do we do about all this that we've been talking about? How do we fight this evil? Why stay vigilant? Why? What does God tell us? Well, in the book of Timothy, 1 Timothy, Paul tells us, or I guess Paul's letter to Timothy, fight the good fight of the faith. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses. What does that mean? Well, guys, we have to stand up for what we believe. We fight the good fight of the faith. Well, how do we do that? Pray. We should pray. We should pray for our enemies. We should pray that somehow they change their hearts. Pray that some of them, if any, find Jesus. We should pray for Jesus to come again. We should pray that that time be soon. So we should pray. We should believe. If you truly believe, if you truly have faith, we need faith, then your faith should give you some security and safety. But the worst thing we can do is deny the existence of the evil and deny the evil for what it is. So pay attention out there, guys. Know that there is darkness out there. There is evil. ISIS is pure evil. Radical Islam, pure evil. Society is becoming more and more evil. But maintain your faith. That's what we've got to do. I know I've talked about self-defense and being prepared and all that. Yes, but I'm not saying go out there and fight physically unless you have to. But you fight evil with good. You fight evil with the holiness of God. Pray, pray, pray. And believe, believe, believe. Oh yeah, and there's that other thing. Tell other people about Jesus. Spread the good news. Perhaps we can outmatch the evil by outnumbering them. This is the fortress. I hope you guys, you get to pick on my brain a little bit. You get to hear my thoughts. Please, if you can, email me, drop a line at my contact page at www.jason-e-fort.com/contact. If you go to that page, you can actually fill out a little message and just send me a message. Tell me what you think. Tell me your thoughts. If you want to argue with me, that's fine. Send me your argument. I like seeing other perspectives. I have a good friend out there in internet land, Facebook land. He reads my blogs sometimes. We have some different perspectives on some things, and I like hearing his perspective. So, contact me, message me. If you want, check out Amazon. Look up Jason E. Fort, and my novels come up. Until next Friday on KDove, this is The Fortress, signing off.